When we imagine the end of worlds, we usually think of mushroom clouds, but there may be far stranger ways to end everything, in fire and paradox. When we envision Doomsday, we usually picture nukes exploding over cities, fireballs in the sky, and the grim ticking of a nuclear clock edging closer to midnight. Nuclear weapons are the archetype of humanity's self-made apocalypse, and before them, I don't think we dreamed of human-generated apocalypses as even possible. Inevitably, they were the effect of angry gods or the slow erosion of time. But once the idea arrived, it blossomed like a mushroom cloud, and science fiction was not content to stop there. The human imagination has conjured up planet busters, star killers, and weapons that don't just kill bodies, but tear apart the very fabric of time, space, and causality. In today's episode, we'll be looking at these ultimate weapons, both the terrifyingly plausible and the fantastically impossible, from doomsday devices that could wipe out a planet to ontological weapons that could unmake you retroactively, erasing you from history itself. We'll ask how realistic they are and what sort of science and technologies might let them exist. And, if all that sounds like fun, grab a drink and a snack, give those like, subscribe, and notification buttons a smack, and let's dive into the apocalypse. Classic doomsday devices. As I said, when we talk about a doomsday device, the nuclear bomb is the closest real-world template, though as we've also noted before in other episodes, it never came close to civilization-ending capacity, let alone doomsday for a species or a whole planet. In the mid-20th century, humanity unlocked the energy of the atom, and proved that we could build weapons capable of destroying not just armies or nations, but civilization itself. While we never actually had stockpiles of atomic weapons sufficient to the task, people thought we did, and for the first time in history, our extinction wasn't just a matter of cosmic accident or natural disaster, it was something we could do to ourselves. And we have some impressive upscale designs for this, like Project Sundial, a proposal for a single nuclear bomb that would explode with a yield of 10 gigatons of TNT, blasting everything inside a radius of 250 miles and possibly triggering a nuclear winter. But even that would not have done it. Indeed, I think we've almost gotten a bit addicted to the notion we can enact a doomsday, as we have had a lot of real crises like our environment that nonetheless never had any chance of causing the end of the world. Dystopia is certainly on the table, doomsday less so, but every bit of new technology we get makes that doomsday dream more plausible. Science fiction has long played with this nightmare. In Stanley Kubrick's Dr. Strangelove, one of my favorite films, the Soviets built a theoretical doomsday machine, akin to Project Sundial, that automatically wrecks the entire planet if they are ever attacked, an absurd yet oddly logical endpoint of deterrence. We end the movie after the device goes off with Peter Sellers' iconic scene as the titular Dr. Strangelove laying out how humanity can recover in underground nuclear-powered bunkers. In Larry Niven and Jerry Pournelle's Footfall, humanity contemplates using salted bombs, nuclear weapons wrapped in cobalt or other isotopes, to create long-lasting fallout as a last-ditch planetary defense against aliens. These are extensions of real physics, terrifying not because they break the rules of the universe, but because they follow them all too well. And of course, sci-fi loves to supersize these concepts. Star Wars gave us the Death Star, a space station capable of blowing up an entire planet with a single shot. Although the Empire had horrible return on investment for these. 2 stations get built, and depending on canon, they only wreck 1 planet. They definitely come close to wrecking the Empire's economy building them though. While I'm not a huge fan of the Disney-era films, we get some great looks at that in both Timothy Zahn's newer Thrawn novels and the Andor TV series, which gives us a believable and nuanced look inside tyrannical empires and doomsday weapons that tends to be rare in sci-fi. These devices are not always implied to be made for evil ends either, or entirely evil ends at least. The Halo series introduced the Halo Array, ring-world superweapons designed to sterilize the galaxy of intelligent life to stop a parasitic threat. We see that in Stargate too, where they have a device used for dialing every Stargate in the galaxy simultaneously to unleash destruction that was designed as a last option for dealing with a plague. Since it would not be fair to mention Star Wars and Stargate without mentioning Star Trek, that franchise probably has more planet-destroying weapons than any franchise except Warhammer 40,000, and Trek had its planet killer in the original series episode, the Doomsday Machine, where a giant automated weapon drifts through space consuming worlds for fuel. And again, Warhammer 40,000 is probably the grand champ here. They blow up and virus bomb planets like it was a hobby, which actually fits the scale. They are an empire of 1,000,000 worlds, from which new planets are being retaken or even colonized and terraformed constantly in a galaxy of ruin. And for them, sterilizing one planet in 1,000,000 is the same as the US wiped out a village of a few hundred. Nasty, but honestly barely a scratch at how many people are born and how many houses are built every day. But a common theme here is scale. Classic Doomsday devices are about brute force, the application of energy in such vast amounts that no city, nation, or even planet can survive. They are destructive, but in a sense, they are honest. You can see the fireball, feel the heat, and calculate the blast radius. They destroy you, but they don't rewrite reality. Cosmic scale Doomsday devices. Once we leave the realms of nuclear stockpiles and cobalt bombs, imagination tends to leap outward, towards stars, black holes, and galaxies. If you can tap the energy of a star, then you can build a Doomsday device that makes nuclear weapons look like firecrackers. This can obviously rise to Thanos Infinity Gauntlet levels, but we do have real weapon designs under known physics that can blow up planets or even galaxies. One of the more realistic proposals is the Nyquil Dyson Beam, which we did an episode on about 9 years back, a theoretical weapon created by surrounding a star with a Dyson swarm of solar collectors and focusing its energy into a coherent laser. Point that at a planet and you can sterilize its surface in minutes. Give it a week and that planet is totally vaporized, depending on how big the star fueling it is. An O-type supergiant could do it in seconds. A smaller red dwarf, months. Aim it at a fleet and it becomes the ultimate anti-navy weapon. This is not fantasy physics, it's just extrapolation of what we could build if we built megastructures to capture stellar output. Black holes provide another terrifying avenue. Imagine dumping matter into a rotating black hole in just the right way to unleash a torrent of energy through the Penrose process, or creating a tiny artificial black hole, feeding it matter, and using the Hawking radiation as a directed energy beam. Gregory Benford's Galactic Center series and Stephen Baxter's Zeely sequence both play with black holes as weapons and tools, sometimes as civilization enders. We took this to an even greater extreme with a device I cooked up a few years back called a quasar cannon, see that episode, where you feed a stream of matter into a large black hole and it basically converts that into a matter-to-energy level yield. You can sterilize whole galaxies with one. Its big brother, designed like a shotgun, I named the Obhoff gun, for my friend Larry Obhoff, who asked a question that made me think of it, and who also makes awesome barbecue. The Obhoff gun is a black hole you feed a shell of a planet, or even stellar remnants, and it basically shoots directed supernova with each shot. You could actually feed neutron stars, which are very small and dense, into one like machine gun ammo, good for barbecuing galaxies or maybe killing gods, should Cthulhu show up on your doorstep. Orson Scott Card gave us a particularly grim example with the Molecular Disruption MD device, introduced in Ender's Game and explored in later Enderverse books. The MD device doesn't just blast things apart, it destabilizes matter at the subatomic level, creating a runaway chain reaction that causes the target to disintegrate entirely. Used against ships or even planets, it turns whole bodies of matter into unbound particles, effectively erasing them from existence. Disturbingly, this is also the basis for their light speed drive, but maybe also fittingly, since in the real world there is also a close relationship between energy and propulsion technologies and weaponry. Then there are truly apocalyptic ideas like triggering vacuum decay. In quantum field theory, our universe may only be metastable. A powerful enough event, say a high energy collision, could create a bubble of lower energy vacuum that expands at the speed of light, rewriting the laws of physics inside it. This is the ultimate Doomsday device, no fireball, no survivors, just the end of everything. Fortunately, most physicists think the energies required are far beyond what we could create with particle accelerators or bombs. But the thought experiment lingers, a reminder that reality itself may have vulnerabilities. There's also new models suggesting these might slow over distance too, and we'll be doing a dedicated episode on it before too long. In point of fact, I was writing it before I stopped to record this episode. Ian M. Banks' cultural novels feature gridfire, weapons that can erase solar systems by rewriting the underlying grid of spacetime. That's another series that's pretty good at getting the sheer scale of super civilizations. Most of their population live in orbitals, small ring worlds, each with a few hundred times the living area of Earth. In Mass Effect, the Reapers cause civilizations and cyclical genocides, not with physics-breaking magic, but with sheer overwhelming force and manipulation of galactic infrastructure. Though they've got a Doomsday weapon they deploy in the third game I won't spoil. Great game series too, I loved everything but the last 20 minutes of it. Doctor Who dabbles in universe-threatening devices like The Moment, a sentient Doomsday device that can end timelines, and that is another series with lots of planet and reality-wrecking equipment. Doctor Who, like the MCU, tends to play very fast and loose with science, even by the standards of Star Wars, but as we'll see later, some of these options might actually be doable under known science. And again, we've got some very destructive weapons under known science. What makes these cosmic devices so fascinating is they stretch our imagination of scale. Nuclear bombs are measured in kilotons or megatons. A Dyson beam is measured in stars. A quasar cannon in galactic ruins. A vacuum decay event is measured in superclusters. They take the logic of Doomsday to its natural extreme, not just the end of civilization, but the end of existence as we know it. And yet, as vast and terrifying as these weapons are, they still obey the laws of physics. They may be improbable, but they are not impossible within the framework of energy and matter. They destroy it, but they don't unmake it. Which brings us to a stranger and darker category, the ontological weapons. Ontological weaponry, breaking reality. If nuclear bombs are the archetypal Doomsday device, then ontological weapons are their strange, reality-bending cousins. These are not just tools of destruction, they are tools of unmaking. A bomb kills you where you stand. An ontological weapon might erase you backward in time, so you were never born. It might override the laws of physics so that your civilization's science ceases to function. It might strike not just at the body, but at history itself. The word ontological comes from ontology, the study of being and existence. An ontological weapon, then, is one that targets existence itself. Where conventional Doomsday devices are measured in megatons or stellar luminosities, ontological weapons are measured in narrative stakes. What if you never existed? What if your victory never happened? What if physics itself decided to change its mind? The erasers of history. Perhaps the most famous example comes from Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time, probably my favorite fantasy series, with the spell or weave known as Balefire. When cast, it doesn't just burn something out of existence, it erases them backward in time, for seconds, minutes, or longer depending on the strength. If your enemy killed your friend 10 seconds ago and you balefire them, suddenly your friend never died. This happens in the series too. Their killer never lived long enough to strike the blow. In Jordan's world, balefire is feared precisely because it frays the very fabric of reality. Too much use risks unraveling the pattern itself, the cosmic tapestry of time. It's not just a weapon of war, it's a weapon of undoing. Robert Jordan was a physicist and veteran, so his work, even though it's sword and sorcery, has a very real and logical flavor to it, rivaled by a few others in fantasy. Brandon Sanderson, who finished the Wheel of Time novels after Jordan's death, being one such, and he has his fair share of cosmos warping concepts in his works too. Alastair Reynolds, my favorite living sci-fi writer, shows us some serious classic Doomsday devices in his epic novel The House of Suns, but his Revelation Space series provides another take on ontological weaponry. The galaxy is full of dead civilizations, and their remnants clinging to existence, but one way this sometimes happens is that people try to invent faster-than-light drives, and they kinda sorta work briefly, but they inevitably fail catastrophically, and were told by the Inhibitors, a malign machine intelligence tasked with wiping out civilizations, that the effect can actually erase an entire civilization backward in time. Thou shalt not violate causality. It's less flashy than a planet buster, but more terrifying. It's like waking up in a world where the wheel was never invented and realizing you've been robbed of possibility itself. Temporal weapons, undoing the timeline. Time travel is fertile ground for ontological warfare. You can go back and prevent your enemy from ever existing, or wipe them out before their fleet is even launched. You don't just win the war, you rewrite it. Star Trek has played with this often. The temporal Cold War arc from the Enterprise series involves factions attacking each other across centuries, undoing victories and rewriting history. Chronoton torpedoes and temporal phase weapons are narrative shorthand for this, bypassing shields because they don't just hit you in space, they hit you in time. I was kinda glad when they wrapped this arc up though. The fourth and sadly last season was better without it, and I always felt that having the captain be the same actors from Quantum Leap, a time travel show, took away some of the novelty. Good show though. Doctor Who takes it further with the Time War, where the Daleks and the Time Lords wage battles with weapons that unmake whole species retroactively, leaving scars on reality itself. In comics, DC's Crisis on Infinite Earths essentially weaponized antimatter waves that erased entire universes and their histories, collapsing the multiverse into fewer realities. Similarly, Marvel's Ultimate Nullifier does what it says on the tin. It nullifies, erasing beings or even cosmic entities from existence. Even Galactus is afraid of it. And beyond the pulpy space opera, writers play with subtler versions. In Babylon 5, the Shadows and Vorlons fight proxy wars, but the temporal weapons of the Great Machine on Epsilon 3 hint at the power to rewrite history. In Destiny and other games, players face foes who manipulate timelines, where a victory in one strand of time does not guarantee survival in another. Weapons of physics editing. Ontological weapons are not just necessarily about time, they're about the rules themselves. If you can change the laws of physics, you can render your opponent's technology, biology, or civilization meaningless. Ian M. Banks' cultural novels revel in this space. I mentioned Gridfire earlier, which burns away regions of space-time itself, erasing stars and planets not just in the present, but from the causal fabric. But even more disturbing are reality-editing munitions, which alter the local constants of physics so your enemy's weapons do not fire, their computers do not compute, or their biology ceases to metabolize. This is ontological warfare by rewriting the rules of the game itself, and realistically, it's not that big a step to assume that the physical constants of nature can be bent or changed. Indeed, most multiverse concepts assume variations not just of timelines of one universe, but other universes where the physical constants are different. Those would be insanely valuable resources if you could travel between them, but there could probably be terrifying weapons too, where regions of overlap unglued reality. Greg Egan in Permutation City and Diaspora imagines computational universes and physics defined by software. In such a cosmos, an ontological weapon might be as simple as a line of malicious code, erasing or rewriting entire realities like hitting delete on a file. If reality is computation, then the ultimate Doomsday device might be reformatting the hard drive. Even The Matrix toys with this idea, where agents delete characters from the simulation entirely. To everyone else, those people never existed, their stories erased with a keystroke. That's an ontological attack on memory and perception rather than physics, but to the victim, it's the same outcome. Mind and meaning as targets. Not all ontological weapons strike at matter or time, some go after meaning itself. Douglas Adams satirized this with the Total Perspective Vortex in The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, a device that shows its victim their absolute insignificance in the universe. Nobody survives the experience. Existence itself becomes unbearable when you realize how tiny you are. Similarly, in Warhammer 40k, which as I mentioned has a surplus of Doomsday options, the Chaos Gods and their demonic weapons often operate ontologically, unmaking not just bodies but souls, erasing them from the warp as though they'd never been. The rules of physics and reality break down around them, and they even manage to remap the galaxy when giant chaos warp storms or the Big Great Rift opens, rearranging the stellar neighborhoods. Indeed, the biggest storm, the Eye of Terror, only comes into existence circa the year 25,000 AD, and yet is literally visible to places elsewhere in the galaxy a few thousand years later where the light of its creation couldn't have reached yet. We also see that in Star Wars The Force Awakens, where the Doomsday device, Death Star 3 basically, is seen real time with the naked eye blowing up planets to those on other planets without lightspeed lag. We see a lot of similar themes in Roger Zelazny's classic Amber series, particularly in the Courts of Chaos, and time being used as a weapon in his lesser-known but excellent novel, The Creatures of Light and Darkness, which is a masterclass in paradox and existential crisis. Needless to say, everything from H.P. Lovecraft and the wider Cthulhu mythos it spawned, or works it inspired, are very centered on the notion of mad gods warping reality. These are obviously far more in the realm of the fantastic, but given that we have literally no idea where the universe comes from, or what, if anything, is beyond or above it, we probably shouldn't be completely ruling that out. We also take for granted in science that reality is objective, but subjective reality is hardly disproven. We just use objective reality as a core assumption of science. Reality is not dependent on our opinion, but then again, maybe it is. When contemplating civilization ending weapons, it's worth remembering that the same ingenuity that could unmake the world can also help us build a better one. That's why I love showcasing what creators can do with freedom and imagination, like in Scav, Nebula's wild new original from the Wendover team. They turned the largest scavenger hunt on Earth into an epic, funny, and strangely inspiring docuseries about human creativity at full throttle. And if you're wondering how AI and automation might help us prevent, or accidentally cause, our next apocalypse, you want to see this month's Nebula exclusive, Autonomous Space Industry, when AI and robots run the economy. It dives into how machines could transform our industrial future and why their growth may outpace our own. Nebula is home to many thoughtful originals you won't find anywhere else, and we have guest passes and gift cards to let you share gift content to others. It's also where every episode of SFAA premieres, days before coming out on YouTube and elsewhere, and without any ads or sponsor reads like this one. Get a lifetime membership, normally $500, for just $300 by using my link, go.nebula.tv/IsaacArthur, and unlock everything forever. Or get an annual plan for 40% off, $36 a year. That's 12 months for the price of 7. Scan the QR code or click the link below to start watching exclusive content like Autonomous Space Industry and Scav. Themes and consequences. What makes ontological weapons so haunting is they attack not just your future, but your past. A nuke destroys your city. Balefire makes it so your city was never there to begin with. A Death Star can terrify rebels. An Ultimate Nullifier terrifies gods. These weapons blur the line between science fiction and metaphysics because they aren't just destructive, they tamper with meaning, with story, with the coherence of reality. From a storytelling standpoint, they are immensely powerful tools. They can undo victories, resurrect allies, or make sacrifices meaningless. That's why authors often restrict their use or build elaborate rules around them. Balefire is limited because too much will unravel the pattern. Cultural-level weapons like gridfire are usually restrained by treaties or ethics. Temporal weapons often trigger paradoxes that even writers struggle to resolve. Philosophically, they raise difficult questions. If your enemy is erased retroactively, what does victory even mean? If history itself can be rewritten, what happens to identity, to memory, to causality? These are not just weapons of war, they are weapons of existential dread. Ontological weaponry is in some ways the purest expression of the Doomsday concept. A nuke says I can kill you. An ontological weapon says I can erase the possibility of you ever having lived. And if that doesn't qualify as ultimate, I don't know what does. Practical considerations and paradoxes. Ontological weapons are great fun for fiction, but the moment you try to think about them seriously, you run headfirst into paradox. Suppose you fire balefire at an enemy general who, a few minutes earlier, ordered their fleet to fire. The general is erased from existence retroactively, so who gave the order? If they never did, then the fleet never fired, which means you had no reason to fire balefire in the first place. The paradox loops endlessly. This is the central issue with any reality-editing device: stability. Our universe seems remarkably resistant to paradox, at least as far as we can tell. Closed time-like curves, paths in space-time that loop back on themselves, are allowed by general relativity in theory, but the consensus is that quantum mechanics or cosmic censorship would prevent them from becoming usable time machines. In other words, reality may have built-in safeguards against this kind of tampering. That's pretty speculative, and so as an alternative, you're just getting branching timelines in other universes that fork off. See our temporal warfare episode and our multiverse warfare episode for deep dives of those issues, including why such battlegrounds will probably turn into black holes. And yet, even without paradox, ontological weapons could be catastrophically destabilizing. Imagine a Cold War not of nukes but of timeline erasers. Every time one side fires, the past itself is rewritten. History becomes a battlefield, with each version overriding the last. How would anyone know if they'd already lost? How would treaties even work when your negotiating partner might never have existed? And again, this may be why so many stories impose limits. Balefire only works for short durations backwards in time. The culture's gridfire is almost never used because even post-scarcity civilizations find it obscene. Temporal Cold Wars in Star Trek are fought by shadowy agents with delicate rules, because an all-out timeline war which shred narrative coherence. The idea is so extreme that most writers instinctively put brakes on it, not just for plausibility, but to avoid writing themselves into a corner. And yet, we have no reason to assume reality would prevent such things being used, and aggressively. Doomsday devices versus ontological weapons. It's worth pausing to compare these two families of ultimate weapons. Doomsday devices are about scale. They use known or extrapolated physics to unleash enormous amounts of energy. They kill populations, shatter planets, or drain stars. But however destructive their effects are at least comprehensible. If someone fires a Nyquil Dyson beam at you, you can see it coming. You can calculate its power. You can imagine defenses. Indeed, we've discussed them. Ontological weapons are about rules. They don't just hit harder, they change what it means to be hit. They erase your timeline, or alter the constants of physics, or nullify your very existence. Defending against them is not a matter of armor or shields, but metaphysics. How do you intercept a weapon fired yesterday? How do you armor yourself against being written out of history? And it's quite possible options would exist. After all, you can invent a device that will travel backward in time. You might be able to invent a device that also shielded you from having time travelers enter your space-time or causality. But which is worse? In raw scale, a grid fire or vacuum decay might erase whole star systems, but ontological weapons are existential in a different way. They attack continuity itself. If civilization is a story we tell about ourselves, then a doomsday device ends the story violently, while an ontological weapon deletes the story from the library. And that might be the deeper terror. A civilization can endure destruction, rebuild from ruins, carry on traditions, write down memories, but erasure leaves nothing to endure. No ruins, no survivors, no record, only silence. The Fermi paradox and ultimate destruction. Of course, whenever we talk about ultimate weapons, the Fermi paradox inevitably comes up. If civilizations can build doomsday devices, perhaps they inevitably destroy themselves. Nuclear weapons alone already give us a plausible great filter. What if the real filters are stranger? Maybe advanced civilizations don't just risk blowing themselves up, maybe they risk erasing themselves. Imagine a young species experimenting with causality manipulation, building temporal weapons or reality editors, and in the process actually unmaking their own timeline. In that case, the universe wouldn't just be silent because everyone died, it would be silent because everyone was erased. Whenever someone gets smart enough to journey to the stars, they invent FTL, and they flick it on and flick themselves out of existence. There's even a disturbing twist. If timeline erasure is possible, perhaps civilizations are constantly flickering in and out of existence. We are here now because in this branch of reality, no one has fired the ontological equivalent of a gun in our direction. But perhaps in a parallel strand, Earth was already unmade, and no one remembers we ever existed. On the other hand, maybe the absence of evidence is itself evidence. If ontological weapons were possible, the first civilization to develop them might have erased all others. And yet, here we are. Perhaps reality is self-protecting, or perhaps the reason we don't see the galactic community is because the ones who meddled with causality all vanished, leaving behind only those who restrain themselves. Or, knowing our tendency to push the big red button, and that this is probably a trait of all curious species, those who simply haven't had a chance to build doomsday weapons yet. So when we look to the stars and imagine civilizations rising, thriving, and perhaps falling, let's hope that the weapons they dream up remain confined to fiction. Because if there is one constant across all timelines, it is that a future worth living in requires we never pull the ultimate trigger. As always, thanks for watching, and have a great week.